In this video, we're going to be dealing with a more advanced visual effects shot that's going to go from everything from camera tracking, CGI, all the way to compositing a final result. Before we get started, I just want to say a massive thank you to all my Patreon members. If you want to check out all of the amazing perks that we offer, you can check us out in the description down below. Hello everybody, I'm super excited about today's video. We're going to be doing a little bit of camera tracking, a little bit of CGI, and then marrying the two together in a composite. And so I'm super excited. If you are a Patreon, make sure to go ahead and download your files down below. You can work along with us exactly what we're doing in today's video. But let's go ahead and jump into it. The first thing, of course, that we have to do is do some camera tracking. So let's hit new and locate the footage that I have provided down below. Okay, so here it is. Let's just open that up. It'll load a little bit. 30 FPS is good. Let's hit OK. And so now we have to go through camera tracking. Now today I'm actually going to be teaching a different method of camera tracking. This is for a method that I usually use when camera tracking is a little bit more difficult and this scene actually needs it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to try to do as manual as possible today. And so instead of going here and hitting auto, which I usually teach, we're going to go over here and hit features up here. We're going to go ahead and go into the advanced tab. This is where we want to change around some things. Now the maximum tracker count is the big issue that we're going to deal with today. We're going to bump that up to, I believe, like 300, I think is good enough for this clip. You can of course go higher, but the higher you go, the longer it'll take to calculate and all that stuff. So 300 is fine for there. And then also we have the small blip size and big blip size. If you don't know anything about blipping inside of Syntheyes, don't worry about it. All that we need to know is that our footage is 4K. And so I want to bump these numbers up a little bit. I'm going to go like 22 is fine for small, and then we'll go like 40 or something like that for big. Those are usually numbers I find work pretty well with all of these. Okay, so once you have all of those information plugged in, I can go ahead and X out of here. And now we want to go ahead and blip every single frame. You do want to make sure that you're on the first frame. For some reason, something weird happens if you don't. So I'm going to go ahead and blip all frames. It's going to go throughout the entirety of the footage. Basically, blipping is just trying to do that feature selection mode to where it tries to identify the best features for the program for it to actually track. So we'll just let that continue to load right here. And there we go. Now you can see all the blips. Now all of this information is basically nothing to us humans, us mere mortals. It's just information that the computer is using. And so now we actually need to go ahead and make these camera tracking markers, because these are actually markers. These are basically just the information that it provides the program. So we'll go over here and peel all. That will basically go ahead and try to select the best kind of camera tracking markers throughout the footage. You can see these little green markers right here, and that's to do with the kind of size of the scene and everything like that. So as you can see, throughout the scene, we have some markers throughout our footage. That is looking good. Now we are ready to go ahead and get our first solve, and so we'll come over to the solver tab. Up here we have an error of a 0 because we haven't solved it yet, so we need to come up here. I just leave it on automatic. That is totally fine. And let's go ahead and get our first solve, and there you go. We got a solve error of a 5.7. That is pretty good for a first solve, but we can of course do way better. And so this shot was shot on a iPhone, and so iPhone has a lot of camera lens distortion. So I want to go ahead and calculate that as well. We'll just click this calculate distortion button right here, and then we can go ahead and hit go again, and we'll go ahead and try to get some of that out. And there you go. Now we have a distortion number down here. So yes, that is pretty much all of our first solve. Now we can go into the refinement process. What we're going to do is you can come up here to track and then clean up trackers, or shift C is what I'm going to be pressing. So shift C, we're going to come over here. We have some high error trackers. So we have 130 of those. You can select them to see all of these. This is actually selecting a lot of detail, and whatever the high error trackers, they're actually going to go ahead and delete them. So we don't want to do this yet. 130 is way too many tracking markers. You can see it's selecting super, a lot of tracking markers around where our CGI is going to be. So we're going to go ahead and unclick this. This basically means that it's not going to go ahead and get those out on this fix. So we're going to not select those as well. And then we're going to come over here to bad frames. You can select those to just show them in the frame. This is basically just going to not go ahead and delete the marker, but it's just going to go ahead and delete the range of those markers that it is bad tracking. And so that'll get out some of the high error of some of those trackers. And so we're just saving some of the data there, if you will. So we'll go ahead and hit fix right there. And as you can see, it's gotten rid of some of the bad markers and also some of the bad frames that some markers might be good for most of the frames, but then there's like 1 or 2 frames that goes haywire. And so go ahead and delete that keyframe range. Let's shift G is to go ahead and solve that again. And there you go. We can see a big jump there, 1.9 solve error. I still want to get that down as low as possible. So we'll go shift C again. Now we're down to 48 high camera trackers. Let's go ahead and select those, just see where they're selecting. I do believe that is a little bit better, but I think we can do bad frames one more time. So we'll go ahead and fix that one more time. Shift G to solve that, and there you go, we're even lower. Now you don't want to do bad frames too many times, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. Basically, once this number is low enough that you know, so 17 at a 30 high error range, that's usually pretty good. That's usually what I try to stick to. And so we'll disable this again. You don't want to do this too many times because that will actually lead to improper information into the program. And so there we go. Let's click this back on and select these. As you can see, they're much less, and so now we're having some of that data that was going to get deleted before. We're still having that in the scene. Let's fix that. It went ahead and deleted those. Let's Shift G to solve that. There you go, a 0.9. Let's go ahead and do it one more time. So Shift C, higher trackers, there's 2. Let's Shift G. Shift C, this is kind of the back and forth, and there you go. Now we have 0 that are above 30. I do like to do kind of 1 or 2 more cleanup just to get it as much as possible. I notice we have a lot of trackers still over here, so I think we can push that up. So let's come and just drag and drop. I'm thinking somewhere like that. So we're just selecting this many camera tracking markers. So we're going to go ahead and fix that, and then Shift G one more time, and there you go. 0.91 is pretty good for 4K. So we're not going to try to push it any further. I think this is pretty good for our scene. So yeah, so now we are ready to go ahead and start setting up our plane. If I actually go ahead and come to 3D, we can see what's actually going wrong right now. If I put a blocks in our plane, you can see it's not correctly aligned to the actual floor plane of the actual scene, and so we need to go ahead and change that. So what we can do is inside of the 3D viewport, we can come to layout. I like going to quad perspective or perspective. We'll go perspective just so you can see it a little bit easier. Up here there is a little panel. It will say lock, and so you want to click that lock button. Then we'll also pan 2D and just kind of zoom out here because it's vertical footage. It gets aligned a little bit weird inside of there. And so yeah, so now we have the floor plane that we can actually see, and you can see it's not aligned with the actual floor plane of our footage. So we need to go ahead and align that. The easiest way I do that inside of Syntheyes is go to lasso trackers down at the bottom mode section down here, and then over here to the grid, and then we're going to go and select this 2 facet verts and trackers. So that is what we're going to be selecting throughout this entire process. So I'm going to go ahead and select all the tracking markers that are going to be on the floor. There are so many in this scene. I'm not going to select all of them because it'll try to do a good job of getting the ones and selecting those. And so all we worry about is just where the CGI is going to be. So around this area. So I'm just going to lasso and select all the kind of ones that are on our floor that I see right now. So something like that. Of course, if you did want to get all of them, you could also come over here, hold shift, and then select some more. So we'll go ahead and do that as well. So just that's a good number. We don't need some of these down here. It looks like some of those actually might give us some errors too because they're a little bit lower in the actual you know, the floor plane, if you will. So now that we have that selected, we'll hit 2 facet verts and trackers, and as you can see, our grid is now rotated to on the floor. You can play this now, and it's much better, and the tracking looks like it's sticking, so that's very good. And then I also just want to point out, if you want to go ahead and set up your origin in the scene and everything like that, you can select just one marker and hit that 2 facets vert and trackers, and that'll go ahead and set the origin. And then of course, if you want to go ahead and do the rotation of the scene, my rotation is actually pretty good, so I'm not going to mess around with it, but I just want to show you, if you select just 2 markers, so just 2 right there, and then hit that button, it'll go ahead and rotate the scene for you. Okay, so that is looking good. I'm going to go ahead and do the scaling inside of Blender, and so I'm not going to worry about scaling inside of Syntheyes. We'll go ahead and make the grid the ground, so you got to press that button right there. Very important. It won't apply if you don't press that button, so I just want to point that out. Now we'll come back to quad perspective over here, and let's go give this a quick test before we export this out. So I'll just make a simple cube down here, and we'll just save the project and play this. And as you can see, our cube is now sticking perfectly onto the floor plane of our scene. And so that's how we know we have a pretty good track. We'll do some more tests inside of Blender before we're sure that the camera track is accurate. But yeah, that is all looking good. Let's go ahead and export this out. Now in this process, let's go back to the solver. I just want to point out something really quick. We have this distortion number down here, and lens distortion is a very critical thing that you have to take into account in the compositing stage. Basically, because Syntheyes and Blender use 2 different ways to calculate distortion, we cannot have this number be anything here. It has to be zeroed out so that we can actually export it to Blender, or it's going to give us an error and it's not going to work properly. So the method that I actually use to go ahead and export this out properly with the lens distortion and everything like that. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to come up here to File. We're going to go ahead and export. And now I use Nuke to actually export out this. If you're using like After Effects or DaVinci Resolve Fusion or anything like that, you're going to have to look up what you actually want to export here. Usually you'll just find it in this menu and stuff like that. But for me, again, I'm using Nuke, so I'm going to go ahead and export with Nuke, and then we're just going to go to Current over there, and then you can save this wherever you want to actually have it saved. Okay, so here's where I want to save it. It's going to go ahead and open up a Nuke project as long as you have the Nuke executable there. So you want to make sure that is good. Let's hit OK, and then if you have Nuke installed and all that stuff, it should go ahead and open up the file. I just want to quickly show this to show kind of what it's doing because it might be a little bit confusing if you don't come from a compositing background. But all this stuff is basically you just have to worry about this section over here, and then this section over here. These are two of the lens distortion, and you can see exactly what it's doing. One is distorting the actual footage, and the other one is distorting the actual CG. And so we'll use this a little bit later. All you have to do is just make sure it's saved, and we can exit out of that. So yeah, so now we have the actual lens distortion data saved out, and so now we need to go ahead and make this number 0. Of course, to remain as non-destructive as possible, we're going to go ahead and File, and I'm going to save next version. So we just version up there, just so the first version still has all that information in. Say we get to the compositing stage and something's a little bit weird, it's nice to have that data still baked into it. So there we go, we have that kind of calculated. Let's go ahead and zero this out. So we're going to come to lens workflow, we're going to undo earlier, so like that. We're just going to hit a type 2 workflow, so yes, and then was lens distortion calculated? Yes, it was, so we're just going to go ahead and undo that. There you go, now you can see it's zeroed out right there, and now is when we can go ahead and export this out to Blender. So we're going to go to File, Export, down to Blender, Python, and then we just want to save this wherever we want it to be saved. So let's save that as. Of course, you do want to plug in some information here, such as your file path down here, very important, so it can actually launch the program. We're going to hit OK and let Blender load up the scene. Okay, so there we go. We have Blender loaded into the scene now. We can come back out here. Everything is looking good. Now, for some reason, it doesn't load in the first frame. You actually have to go forward a frame and then back a frame, and it'll go ahead and reload everything. But as you can see, we have the scene set up, and if I play it, everything is moving around and looking nice there. Let's go ahead and do a couple things. I don't like having all these collections. It's kind of messy up here, honestly. So I'm going to back out of some of these things, just leaving the camera tracker collection. Go ahead and delete the light. And then if I come inside of here, I'm going to select the Syntheyes world and camera, hit M over here, and just create a new camera collection. Just kind of organizes some things so that everything is very organized over there. So now we can turn off the camera trackers. I don't really need that for now. And this is where we can go ahead and have a little bit of fun and actually go ahead and make some scaling accurate into our scene. If I go ahead and we'll say a cube is in my scene, this cube, if I come over here to the end panel, we can see it's 2 meters tall, and so that is 2 meters. That is way too small, and so we need to go ahead and actually size this and scale this up to be accurate for our scene. This is very important for our scene because we're going to be dealing with heavy depth of field and also lighting. It's very important to get the accurate lighting scale, just because the shadow fall off and everything like that isn't going to make sense if the thing is like 2 meters in the CG scene, but it's supposed to be like 2 inches in the actual scene. So anyway, we can see that we have this. Now I went ahead and shot this footage myself, so I actually took some measurements, and from this point right here, so this little thing in the desk mat that I have, to this point right here is about 4 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new mesh plane. We're going to go ahead and come over here, and we have the dimensions. Let's just hit 4, and then if you type in inches, it'll go ahead and do that conversion for you. And so there you go. Now we can't even see it down here. To actually scale the scene, I am not going to size up the plane because as you can see, if I scale up the plane, it's actually changing those dimensions over there. Let's come to the camera tab. Let's go to the Syntheyes world. That is basically an empty object that is parented to the camera and the trackers so that we can scale the scene of the world. So I'm going to hit S on this one, and we can scale that down. And again, this cube right here is 4 inches. So we need it to be from this tip to this tip right here. And so I'll scale this in the X and then like rotate it around like that. Then we'll scale this in some more. So maybe around like that. Let's test, move that around on the ground plane, and there you go. So you can see from this tip to that tip, it's roughly 4 inches. Again, this isn't like exact, but it's pretty darn close, and I don't think we're going to run into too many issues if we leave it like this. Okay, so let's go ahead and start doing some CGI and some fun stuff there. So first thing I always like to do is go ahead and switch it to cycles. Then we're going to do GPU compute, denoise the viewport, and then I'm going to go ahead and set the sample count to 128 for now. We can always change it up in a little bit. Also, since we're rendering at 4K, we don't really need to render at 4K until the final render. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to 50% just so it renders a little bit faster in the preview phase so we can make decisions faster there. Final thing, we do need to have some motion blur and some film transparency. There we go. And in testing, I do believe I settled on like a 0.25 for the motion blur. I find iPhone footage, the motion blur is much less compared to like a DSLR and stuff. So that's why I set the shutter down a little bit. So there we go. We have everything is looking good. Let's go ahead and put in some CGI objects. Now I'm going to be using Cargo by Kitbash today. It's a amazing software, not sponsored by them at all. I just use them a lot. So those are the assets I'm going to be using today. Of course, if you do want to work along with us still, I'll provide some of the links to some free assets that you can use to still work along with us down in the description below. So definitely go ahead and make sure you download that. I can't give away any of my assets due to licensing restrictions. But anyway, let's go ahead and import in some of our assets. Okay, so here is Cargo by Kitbash 3D. I went ahead and downloaded 3 different assets that we're going to be using today. So I just typed in manhole in the models section and 3 of these came up. So we're going to be using all 3 of these. All you have to do is just click import. If you've used Cargo before, it's a great service. Love it. Makes my life super easy as a visual effects artist. And so we'll just let those kind of load into the program there. Okay, so there we go. We have some of our objects loaded into the program. I'm going to go ahead and click over here, select hierarchy and M, and just make a new collection so we can start having things organized. It's easier to do this now versus later. And so again, just making a new collection for all of these objects over here. So let's grab all these and I'm going to scale them down. This is going to be kind of like a miniature world type of thing. And so we're going to have a ton of fun with that. And so roughly around there, let's go ahead and determine where I actually want some of these things. So let's go ahead and select both of the manhole objects and I'll place this somewhere in the scene. Let's see where our camera kind of zooms into. So like right there, let's scale it up a little bit. Something like that, I believe, is kind of the size that I went for my shot. And so that is looking good. Let's go ahead and place some of the other objects around and stuff and have a little bit of fun with it. I'm just going to copy what I did before, but like I took, well, first of all, we can go ahead and select all the objects here and I'm going to go ahead and unparent them. So right click, we're going to go to parent, unparent, and keep transform, just so we can delete this empty that we have right here. We don't really need that. And so next what we need to do is we can just have fun playing around with this stuff. I might scale this up a little bit. You do want to make sure it's on the ground plane. And so actually both of these things are not on the ground plane. So we'll move this up and then also these 2 things up as well, just so that these are on the ground plane. Very important because we established that ground plane in Syntheyes. So there you go. We can see we have everything on the ground now. Let's go ahead and place some of these around. Now I don't like how there are 2 duplicate objects in the same object. So I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of one like that. And then also here, I'll come into solid mode. We'll go over here to select this. And then what I want to do is I don't want this kind of object over here. It's also floating for some reason. So that's kind of weird. We'll go ahead and delete the faces on this one. This one though, if I do that, I'm holding Control L to select the linked vertices and stuff like that. So just a quick tip there. We'll go ahead and P, separate by selection, and now we have these 2 things separated so we can differently affect them if we want. So now we'll just place these around. So that like right there. I also might right click and set origin to center of the volume. So there we go. And move that around. That just makes rotating them a little bit easier. So we'll rotate that around like that. I kind of want these signs kind of facing in. You can go to render mode to kind of see what we're doing here. And then we'll do like another one over here. So Alt D, come over here, just move that there. We'll move this sign like over here, something like that, you know. This is where you can have a little bit of fun with it. Even if you downloaded your own models and stuff like that, you don't have to exactly copy what I'm doing. This is just kind of what I'm doing for my own shot like that. So we'll also maybe duplicate some of these bricks around this one. Let's go ahead and set the origin to volume again and change some of these around. So there we go. Let's Alt D, maybe set some back here. Make sure the objects also don't like touch each other too. Like this one's a little bit too close. So there we go. And yeah, we'll just go ahead and place like another one over here or something like that. There we go. So now we have everything. Let's double check that everything is on the floor. As you can see, everything is resting on the floor. The things over here are actually floating a little bit. So I'm going to go and move these down ever so slightly just so they're touching. Don't know why they weren't exact, but that is all okay. We'll just move it down a little bit like that. So there we go. Now we have all the objects into the scene. We might want to go ahead and actually move the manhole cover. I might move it like over here. So that might mean moving our fence, and I might rotate it so that it's like setting on the ground and also touching the edge of the manhole. So that's just about like rotating and stuff like that. There we go. We do have a little bolt that's kind of coming out. So what I ended up doing is just kind of selecting all of the faces up here, and then we can just G-Z move those down so it's underneath. There we go. So yeah, so that's all I ended up doing. We can mess around with some of the other CGI a little bit later. I kind of want to mess around with some lighting now. And so let's do a mesh plane. We have to actually establish a ground plane. I'm going to hit M and make that its own collection. So ground plane collection right there. Let's go ahead and put a material onto it. So I'm going to go and bring out a new window, go to shader editor, new material, footage is what I'm going to call mine. And then of course we do need to go ahead and input the footage, basically project the footage onto this ground plane. Let's put the color to the color. So base color right there, open up our footage. So right here, we can open up that image. Now it is a movie sequence. So we got to hit 338. So that is our end keyframe down here. Auto refresh. We're going to go ahead and set this to mirror. And then if you hold Control T, we can add a texture coordinate mapping node, plug it into window. And there you go. That is pretty much all we have to do. Let's also increase the roughness and decrease the specular just to remove any kind of reflections in our scene. So let's go to the rendered view. So there you go. Now we actually have the actual texture into the world. And so now we can actually set this up as a shadow catcher. So we're going to come over here, go to visibility and shadow catcher. There we go. So yeah, now we're ready for some lighting. Now I'm going to keep it super simple for you guys today. We're just going to do an HDR setup. I actually found an HDR that matches the lighting of the room pretty well in my shot. And so that's always nice if you can find one like that. Especially for a scene like this, there aren't really many reflective objects. And so we won't even have to really worry about the reflections being off in the HDRI. So we'll come over here to the world, we'll click this button and go to the environment texture. We're going to open up the HDRI. That'll be linked in the description below if you want to go and download the one I'm going to be using today. So right here, we're going to go ahead and open the image. And there we go. Now we have some lighting data baked into the scene. Now, if for whatever reason the direction of the light is actually off, this is perfect for me right now. It's going kind of up and to the left. If it's off for you, you want to come up to the world settings up here, Control T, and then you just want to play around with this Z value. But like I said, it was perfect for our scene, so I'm going to hit 0 right there. Awesome. So now we're ready to start breaking it up into different passes and start actually doing some more CG for our final kind of CG passes. So we'll go ahead and come back to object. Now, one quick thing I realized I did here, I have a ground plane, but we need a little cutout hole in the middle here. So an actual easier way to do this, I'm going to go ahead and delete the plane that we had set up. I'm going to add in a circle instead. We're just going to scale that down all the way to our little manhole. So yeah, like something like that is looking good. We can go to edit mode. So tab, I'm going to hit F to add a face, and then E to extrude, S to scale. So we'll scale it out, and then X and delete the face that we have selected. And as you can see, there we go. We now have a new kind of thing that we're going to use as our ground plane. But now if we select this middle face and delete that face, we now have a nice little hole in the center. So just an easier way to do that. We'll go ahead and scale this up a little bit more, and we can go ahead and quickly apply that footage. There we go. So this is the exact same thing as before. We can change it back to a shadow catcher over here, and there you go. Just makes it a little bit easier over here to actually cut out the hole in the center of our floor. So there we go. Now we have this hole. Let's go ahead and actually make it a hole, just so we can have that effect like there's something underneath, you know, an underground world or something, for example. What we can do is I'll just go ahead and select this. If you guys can see, I'm selecting the edge loop of our ground plane. So I'm going to Shift D, duplicate that. We're going to P to separate by selection. There you go. So now we have two up here. I can disable the shadow catcher for this one. And also I'm going to go ahead and exit out of the footage for this one as well. We can bring that into its own collection. We can just make this like hole, for instance, something like that. It's looking pretty good. But yeah, so now we have our hole. Let's go ahead and go into edit mode again. We'll hit A to select everything, F to make a face, and then E, Z to move it downwards, just so we're making an actual hole right there. So that looks pretty good. We do need to select this top face right there, and then let's go ahead and delete that face, and there you go. Now we actually have a hole, just kind of using the geometry we already had to go ahead and save some time there. So there you go. We have a hole now. Now in my shot, I actually went ahead and put a ladder into this as well. And so I'm going to go back to cargo. Again, guys, check out the link in the description for the link to cargo if you are interested, or if you want to stick for free, I have some free assets down below that will serve a similar purpose to this. But anyway, we have this ladder. I just hit ladder A right here. So download and import that into the scene, and we'll come over here. That is right here. We'll go ahead and scale this down into the scene. If I can actually see it, let's bring this to a 3D viewport. It's super big, so we do need to kind of scale this down. Come to the top view, rotate that 90 degrees, and then bring it over here. Kind of make it as big as the hole, something like that. It's looking good. Then we'll go ahead and move it down. Now you are seeing this little thing right here. This is kind of a weird thing, and you might be questioning what that actually is, and that's to do with the camera clipping. So we'll come over here, select the camera up here, go to the camera data properties, and the clip starting in, we'll mess the clip start way down so that we can actually see down here as well. So just a quick tip right there, makes it super easy. So we'll bring this down again. Now, in order to actually get this to look kind of more realistic and stuff, I don't want this kind of top section of the ladder. So what I ended up doing was coming to the side. We'll go ahead and just delete, like, say, these faces right here. So delete the faces, and then we also don't need these in the back as well. So we'll go ahead and get rid of those. And then I went ahead and joined these faces. So I'll just hit F up here. So you can actually see F right there. There you go, and it is giving us some weird kind of things here, so we do need to go ahead and UV project this. An easy way I just found to do it real quick is go to the top view, hit U, and then we're going to project from view, and there you go. It kind of helps that out. And also, I'm going to throw a quick subdivision surface modifier on this, and we do need to mess around with this a little bit just to make it look actually good over here. We'll go ahead and hit I to inset both of those like that. We'll go ahead and Control R to make these a little bit more sharp like that. And then just to round off the top, we'll go ahead and make another loop cut right up here, something like that. So it makes a little bit more sense and kind of removes that seam as we had it before. So that looks good. The final thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and put a texture onto the kind of material and stuff in here. Now, of course, you can download the texture as I have it down below. What I'm going to do is we'll go ahead and UV unwrap this ourselves just because it's going to be super easy like that. I'm going to select the bottom of this, and then I'm also going to select the kind of edge loop right here. So that is going to be one that we're not going to see on camera. And so that is going to be the edge that there's going to be a visible seam. And so you want to select an edge that you're not actually going to see on the camera. So we'll hit U, we're going to hit U and mark seam. So that'll mark the seam. And then we're going to hit A, U, and then unwrap angle based right there. And so there you go. Now we have it unwrapped. Might mess around with it in a little bit, but as you can see, it now is unwrapped. Let's go ahead and slap a texture onto it. So we're going to go to, actually, what we can do is if you download the texture that I'm going to be using down below, we can go ahead and append it into the scene. So File, Append, and then we're just going to locate wherever you downloaded that texture. Okay, so rebar reinforced concrete is the one I'm using. Then we'll go into the blend file, go to material, and then just import this into the scene so we can append that in. And of course, we'll just come over here and apply that. So rebar reinforced concrete, there we go. And as you can see, it's way, way too big. So let's come to the shader editor again. Usually what I'll do is I just add a value node in here. Might plug that and just move that up a little bit. And then depending on what you actually want, I did a few other things. For instance, I didn't love the red texture that we were getting, so I went ahead and plugged in a hue saturation value node. Just turn the saturation all the way down, and I believe like a value of 0.5 just to make it a little bit darker. Something like that is looking a little bit better to me. Also, it's looking a little bit crushed in the Z direction, so we can go ahead and go to the UV editing workspace over here, and we can play around with this a little bit more. So we'll go to rendered view and just see it over here. So something like that. Let's go ahead and select A. I'm selecting A because we don't really see the bottom, so it doesn't matter. So if I hit S, we'll go like Y maybe and make it a little less scrunched. So maybe like something like that. Let's see what it looks like on the camera point of view. So again, S, Y. Yeah, something like that is looking pretty good and scales correctly. So there you go. Now you guys are experts at UV unwrapping. So hope that made a lot of sense and is getting a result that you actually kind of like over here. So there we go. We have that set up. The final thing that we need to go ahead and do that I did for my scene is I'm going to go ahead and make a light kind of come from the bottom and kind of illuminating, like there's some like dark mystic thing going down at the bottom. So we'll go ahead and add a area light, rotate that on the X 180, put that down here, and then I just scaled it down, something like that, made it red. And then you can just change this value to whatever you want, like a 0.2 or 2 watts or whatever. The big thing that you just want to make sure is you don't actually see the bottom of the hole. It kind of sells the illusion of it, you know. So if I come here, we can't actually see the bottom of the hole, and so you just want to make sure that is the case. And yeah, everything is looking good there. I think we are ready to go ahead and start breaking out some different passes and get this ready for a final composite. So yeah, so we'll come to the solid view. What we need to do is we need to go ahead and break this out into separate passes. For this scene and for most of my visual effects, I only really do a main beauty pass, and then I want to do a separate shadow pass. You'll see why in a little bit, why it's important to do a shadow pass versus a shadow catcher pass. There is a difference, and whoever tells you to do a shadow catcher pass is probably doing it wrong, is what I would say. But anyway, we do want to go ahead and separate out some of those things. So I'll do just objects for this. And then what we can do is I'll do a new view layer, just let that load, and I'll name this shadow. There we go. So yeah, so now we need to go ahead and start breaking out those things into different shadow passes and everything. So the objects are in one layer. I'm going to bring out the indirect only up here so that we can actually see that. We can go ahead and make the shadow only. So we'll go to the objects and set that to indirect only. So there we go. Now we have the shadow, which is looking good. And real quickly, I just saw we have the ladder in here as well. So let's just right click, select hierarchy, move that to the objects. Don't know how that got out of there, but there we go. And while we're at it, I'm just going to delete this whole thing and put it in the objects as well, just to keep everything super organized. We don't really need a separate collection for that. There you go. So now we're having just the shadow into the scene, so that is nice. That is exactly what we want for this pass. And then we'll go over to objects right here, and all that is loading in. And if we turn this to indirect only, you can see we're not having the shadow into the scene, but it's still kind of indirectly affecting, but we do still see the bottom of the hole here. So what we actually might try to do is come and select holdout up here. And so instead of indirect only, we'll select holdout. And then there we go. That is doing exactly what we want. It's still indirectly affecting the scene, as you can see. So we're not having any issues there, but it's actually creating a holdout and we're not seeing the bottom. Holdout, if you don't know, it basically just means that anything behind that object is going to be rendered as transparency. So it's just getting rid of the kind of hole in the floor effect. Yeah, so that is looking good. We can finally come back out to compositing, use nodes. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this, hit shadow. We'll set this up, file output. Right there, come to the node properties, add some inputs. So we'll make this objects underscore shadow underscore, just so the underscore after that is going to be the frame number. It just kind of separates it out for me. We're just going to be rendering as PNG just to have the AGX view transform baked into it. And of course, render out your base path. That'll be wherever this renders out into. Plug the objects into the object, shadow into the shadow. Like that, and then there we go. Now we can render out both of them at the same time. The final thing that I want to do before we do that is I do want to come over here, and this scene is very, very high depth of field. You can see over here it's very, very blurry. Over here it's very sharp and in focus. Then back here it's also blurry as well. And so this actually goes all the way back to when we were setting up the scale correctly inside of Blender. This is where we want to go ahead and add in that focus. And so it actually does change throughout the shot, which I actually really like because it'll basically make our CGI feel integrated into the shot that much better. And so what I'm going to do is let's go ahead and empty. I'm going to do, let's say like a sphere, for example, just scale that down. We're going to use this empty as basically wherever the focus plane is. And then on top of that, you got to kind of think of it through a phone point of view. It's going to be kind of catching focus points throughout whatever we're focused on. And so we're going to be focused on this table throughout the entirety of the shot. And so just kind of a good practice I like to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a constraint over here. And then we're going to limit the location, and we're going to limit the location on the z-axis to 0. So literally, if I wanted to move it up and down, I literally cannot. It's always going to be on that z-plane. So then literally what we can do is just hit G and just move it around on the floor plane. Just makes it a little bit easier. there for us. So there we go. Now is the fun part about animating the focus. So we can come and first I'm just going to name this so we can come back to it up here. So we're going to come and put the focus up in the camera just to have it a little bit organized. And then every 20 frames is where I'm going to add a new kind of focus animation. We can go ahead and turn on the auto keying here. So now all we have to do, I'll turn objects off for now, but all I want to do is I just want to find the area of the shot where it's in focus. So we'll hit G, move it around over here. It might be easier actually to come and make a new window and go to the top view just to kind of see it over here. So there we go. So at 1, that's where the focus is going to be. We'll come to frame 20. It looks like it didn't really move around too much. Come here. It looks like here is the biggest focus. Come to 60. And yeah, just repeat this process until you are happy with the result. And as you can see, at the start, it doesn't really move around too much. And the fact that the camera is getting closer to it, it's going to help a lot to actually sell that. So yeah, as we get really close to it, you can see really the sharp areas of the frame and stuff. And so that's going to make our CGI really pop in, you know, blend into the actual photo. So there you go. We'll just keep doing this a little bit more, but I think you guys get the gist. So like right here, it's in focus. Then we'll come to 200. Let's see, like right there, maybe 220. And yeah, I'm just going to continue to do this until we're kind of at the end of it. And then we can apply that depth of field into the actual camera inside Blender. Okay, so I have finished animating my focus plane. You can see it kind of follows wherever the focus is. You can see it kind of comes in a little bit. Something like that. Yep, looking good. And it kind of goes there and then there. So yeah, so that is pretty cool. Let's go ahead and apply this focus as well. So I'll get the objects back and go into rendered view. I do want to kind of see what it's doing first of all, and then unhide our ground plane, which I accidentally did. But yeah, so now we have the focus empty. We need to go ahead and make that actually work as a depth of field. So focus on object, we're going to put as our focus empty right there. And then by default, it's way too high. I'm kind of looking like at this area to determine this is way too blurry. So I believe like around a 11 f-stop was what I ended up sticking with. That looks pretty good. You can play around with it. But yeah, you just want to match it to your eye as much as possible. Unfortunately, iPhone doesn't have any like hard f-stop values, and so I can't give you the exact kind of number there. But yeah, that looks pretty good. I think I'm going to stick with that on this one as well. I do believe 11 is what I stuck on for the final shot. So there you go. But yeah, so that is pretty much everything set up. We are ready to start rendering this out. You do want to do a couple of test renders, right? You always want to do some test renders. And so let's go ahead and do that right now. Let's go ahead and render the image and just let it load for a little bit. Okay, so there we go. We have the first render. So this is the actual objects and stuff like that. And then we can come up here and see the shadow as well. Everything is looking good. You want to do this. Usually I'll do it like a frame in the beginning half, middle half, and then last half, even though that didn't make sense because there aren't 3 halves, but you know what I mean. Just doing 3 different passes to make sure all throughout the render it's going to look good, but I'm confident we can go ahead and render this out. Let's turn this off just so we don't run into anything else in the future. And then we can come over here, set our final render value. So we'll turn this back to 100% so that we're rendering in full frame. Since we're in 4K, usually I'll just stick to 128. So that's totally fine. You can do more. I personally wouldn't do any less than this, but that is totally up to you and your own machine. But yeah, now we are ready to go ahead and render the animation. Okay, so once your CGI has finally rendered out, we are finally ready to hop on over to compositing. Like I mentioned before, we are going to be using Nuke today. If you do want to work along for free, and Nuke non-commercial is totally fine for this project. The only thing that you might have to do is just convert everything to 1080p, but it should all work out as long as you do that. So as you can see, here is the final composite that we're doing. I'll try to walk through what I'm doing over here. So we'll just go ahead and kind of break things down one by one. So first of all, let's just delete all of the nodes over here. So right now we have it set up to where it's basically just combining everything. So we have literally the CGI, right? So it's PNG. We're pre-multiplying that to apply the alpha. You can see the difference here. So applying the alpha just so it's not ugly. And then we're merging that over top of the actual footage. So super simple layout right there. That's how we get started. Let's go ahead and first add in our shadow. So I'm going to hit G, add a gray node over here to our shadow. I like to do a gray node just because real life shadow actually inherits some of that color value. So that's why I do it as a mask instead of a layer. We'll decrease the gain and just kind of play around with it. There's no like kind of one object in the scene over here that like gives us an idea of like what the shadow should look like, and so it's kind of just up to taste. So we'll just leave it for here for now. So that is looking good. Next thing, let's go ahead and color grade the footage. Now if you are doing this in like After Effects and stuff like that, you're gonna have to translate some things I'm doing, but it's super simple, guys. Like this composite, it's super simple. So let's go ahead. I'm going to select the actual white value. So if I hold Control and then Shift, I can click and drag and select the white value over here. And then I do want to select the white value of our footage. So I'm going to select the actual, let's select something back here. So it's just more of the white value, not some of this black right there. So there you go. That's the white of the actual matte that we are using. And then we'll go ahead and do it for the blacks as well. So down here, we'll have a lot of black in our actual thing. So again, just Control Shift clicking that, so that we have get the actual black values over here. And then there's no great black value for the actual footage. I found I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of eyeball it. So we'll hit disable that. As you can see, that's already making it a lot more realistic. We'll go ahead and play around with the lift and get a value. Yeah, this is something like this maybe. Again, it's kind of hard to select it just because some of these black values I didn't really love for the scene. So there you go. We have everything looking good. Now, like everything is a little bit too sharp right now for my liking. So I'm going to go ahead and add a defocus node, and then we're just going to play around with that. So we'll just decrease this a little bit. I think I set it like a 0.3 or 0.4 or something like that. So just to add a little bit of defocus into it, like barely anything, but still it needs to be there because it looks wrong without it. Also, everything is a little bit too saturated. So I'm going to go ahead and desaturate the CGI a little bit. So something like that is looking better. As you can see, just desaturating it a tiny amount. But yeah, that is pretty much all of the compositing I believe I did for the actual shot. There is like one section where the phone shadow kind of comes over there. So what I ended up doing, I added another gray node over here, and then with a roto node, so adding a roto node and plugging that into the mask, I can mask out the section where it actually is. So we'll just do that really quickly. So just click and dragging the roto node to make a nice roto shape. We'll bring that down here. And then I just blurred that out. So we're just going to do like 100 blur. Let's see how that looks in the alpha channel. Yeah, that looks totally fine. And I might select some of these, hit Z to kind of spread those out and make them a little bit more curved and a little bit more nice looking. There we go. So yeah, so now we have that shape, and I actually didn't even roto the shape. I found with the camera movement and stuff like that, it honestly did the heavy lifting for us. All we have to do is come over here and I just decrease the gamma ever so slightly. So something like that. Just so you can see as the phone shadow goes over it, we have a little bit of darkening there as well, kind of sells in the effect of the shot. So there you go. And so now the final thing that we have to do for this shot is go ahead and apply our lens distortion back in. And so that goes all the way back to what we did before when we rendered out of Syntheyes. We need to go ahead and apply that lens distortion back into the scene. Okay, so now what I can do is I can find that Nuke script that we made before. Again, this is with all of the distortion baked into it. We'll go ahead and drag that into this Nuke script. You can see it up here. It has a lot of this stuff. We don't really need this stuff in the middle. This stuff is just like kind of replacing the CGI, if you will. So we'll get rid of that. And then we also need to think, we don't need this as well. We need to think, do we need a distort or a redistort? In our case, we do need to redistort because we're going to apply it to the CGI, not the footage. And so we'll come over here with this node. This is the only node that we really care about. We'll go ahead and plug that into the CG. As you can see, it's applying that distortion. It's redistorting it because the footage is distorted. We need to redistort the CG to match the footage. You can see it's cutting in a little bit down here. And honestly, the only way that I find to do that, to get rid of that, is to just up the scale in a final transform. I do want to do it as little as possible, but that's the nice thing about 4K is we can kind of get away with that. So there we go. We're just cutting out that little distortion at the bottom. No worries there. And I am doing that after the merge, by the way, because we want to do the footage and the CG. And so yes, that is looking good now. And of course, since we did it to the CG objects, we also need to do it to the shadow as well. So don't forget about the shadow. Both need distortion onto it. So there we go. Now we have pretty much everything set up. We can go ahead and render this out and come over here. These are the settings I used in my right node. So I'm just doing a H.264 MOV file. High is fine. Rec 709 as the output transform since we shot in Rec 709. render that out, and we should have a final result. Okay, so here is the final result that we got, guys. Hopefully you guys got something similar. I find it's really realistic, especially with some of the subtle things like depth of field and motion blur, and then also that little mask we did in compositing to introduce some of the shadow back into the object. You can see it kind of matches there and gives a nice little flair to it. But anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching. Again, we have a Patreon, Discord link in the description for those. But anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.